Hello, and welcome to another thrilling episode of My Dog Will Eat My Face. I had originally conceived of another topic that I had planned to discuss during this podcast. I worked a little bit on that in the last week or so. However, as life would have it, things sort of changed. And I've decided to go in a different direction, at least for now. I'll shelve my other idea for later on when things might be a little bit more calm for me. But right now, I seem to have more pressing things I wish to share and talk about. Basically, the short end of it is things have been pretty rough for me on the medical side. I've definitely been dealing a lot more with some of the same old stuff that I've been talking about, but nowadays I get short of breath just doing some of the most basic things in my own home while using supplemental oxygen and find it difficult to be up and about to do much of anything during the day. So I apologize for not sending a podcast out last week. Again, it was just a case of me being far too physically drained to do something as simple as that. So things have been more or less on a steady decline as far as my physical well-being. And that prompted some discussions that I wanted to share today. These are discussions I've had with some folks in my hospice team. I better be careful because some of them listen to this. I better not say anything mean about them. I'll have to open up a member only or members only group where I can just bash them. No, I'm kidding. I actually like my hospice team, so it's not that big of a deal. But I, it's going to be interesting when they hear me talk about them. Um, Although they're not the first to experience that. There's friends and family that have experienced that in the past. They said, "Hey, you talked about me." But anyway, moving on. I want to talk about a sort of a brief discussion I had with some of my hospice team and the gravity of that and the reaction I got when I shared it with an old friend of mine. I know that sounds kind of convoluted. I want to talk about a conversation with a hospice person, and when I shared that, the content of that conversation with a third party, they said something that I want to talk about today. Does that make sense? Wow. Kind of a acrobatic tongue tie there to describe what I want to talk about. But it's true. That is what I do wish to talk about because it's been on my mind. It's been something that's far more belabored my thoughts than anything else lately. So that means to me that it's precisely the thing I should discuss. No matter how tangled and web-like it might sound when I describe it. I'll do my best. But if you understood it so far, you shouldn't have any problems. If you're still not clear, I want to talk about a conversation I had with someone on my hospice team that I shared with a third party, a friend of mine, who then asked me a question about that and said it and talked to me about that. And then I wish to share the content of that conversation with a friend here today. There. So, without further ado, I will go ahead and jump right into it. All right, so the first step of this entangled web is I spoke to some of my hospice team about a particular topic. It's certainly an uncomfortable topic, one that I don't think many people ever like to have face. I basically asked them about what I can expect as I get worse with these physical symptoms and what I might face in coming days or months as I continue to decline and eventually die. I wanted to know exactly what to expect. Not a lot of people ask questions like that in real life, and I'm one of the few who was lucky enough to do so. And according to my hospice team, I'm one of the few who's facing such circumstances who even bothers to ask a question like that. Most people live in a world of deniability. They don't want to face the facts that they're dying. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it because it's too much of a daunting concept for them to wrap their head around it. And it's easier to take the ostrich approach and just forget about it, shove your head in the dirt, and not pay attention until something happens. That's just not my style. I like to know the dirty, grim details. I don't want, and I've said this to them, I don't want any pussyfooting around. I don't want any vague or feel good references that are just there to account for my fee-fees. I want candid, open, and honest discussion and clear and candid answers to my questions, holding nothing back. Because if I'm asking the question, I want the answer. I'm not asking it for giggles. I'm asking it because I really do want to know the answer to that question. And I want them to have the respect of me to reply and answer that succinctly and correctly as I have asked it. And they've done that. I have no problem with my hospice team whatsoever. They have approached me that way as I described perfectly, I have to say, throughout the entire duration that I've worked with them. They have been very open, very candid, and made full disclosure about everything that is going on within my health and what I might be able to expect as things progress. And if they don't know an answer to something, they tell me they don't know. They might give me several possibilities and say, but we don't know which of those will happen. They're very honest and very candid. And if they don't know, they don't know. If they do know, they are also very candid and tell me what it is I have asked. Now, the rarity is also there with them that they've indicated to me that virtually none of their patients have asked them to be so open and candid as I have. A lot of people do not like to talk about their own death and don't ask for blatant, open answers and full disclosure, knowing full well that the answer will not be something you want to hear, possibly, but something that will be the truth. Pardon me. And they've said several times that I'm a very rare incident of a patient who actually approaches it that way. The vast majority, as I said, are in a world of denial and are too worried about their feelings being hurt than to ask such open questions and ask for such clear, succinct, and candid answers. And in fact, when the tires start hitting the road, so to speak, and the hospice team tries to tell other patients, whoa, this is what's happening. You got to, think about what you want to do in terms of a will or planning your funeral or final preps, think about who you want to say goodbye to, whatever it might be. And the patient is non-responsive. I mean, they're dead. I mean, they're too late. No, I'm saying that the patient doesn't want to even do that. They can't confront that reality even when it's flatly told to them. To give them the appropriate information so they can at least do those things that they value in the last days of their life, which is really a good thing to do, I think. But most people don't even want that. They want nothing. They don't want to hear about it until it's too late. And there's nothing they can do then. And that's really unfortunate because there's a lot of planning that can help the survivors out that the patient can do, such as by executing a will, which I have for a long time now, and get life insurance maybe, which I have for a long time now. And I've even created this podcast so that my family could hear my voice, and hear me talk, and hear me laugh forever after I've long gone, long since departed this planet. And I've done everything that I can think of, what I can at least, and what I can think of to help them upon my demise so that it's not a total fustercluck. But they are in a position to where they can handle it without fighting amongst them, without having to go through a probate court system, without having to massacre each other for rights to my estate or anything like that. And I've seen things like that happen in my personal life. Obviously, I don't work in hospice. I'm sure my hospice workers have seen that, sadly, many times. I just personally have seen it happen in my normal life where people die and the results amongst the living are just catastrophic. But a lot of that was because the person who died, it was sudden, it wasn't expected. I have the luxury now of expecting my death, which gives me time to prepare certain things and make it as painless as I possibly can for my survivors. because they're the real victim. That's something I've always said. Even though I'm the one who's going to die, I am not the victim. Not one bit. Because once I've died, I'll be dead. I mean, I guess, yeah, sure, I won't be able to get to do all the things I've wanted to do in my life. In that sense, yeah, it's a bummer. But I don't have to endure anything because I will be dead. I won't be thinking about the things I wanted to do because I will be a carcass, rotting in a drawer, maybe. But the living don't have such luxury. The living have to decide what to do with this carcass now that they have to deal with. They have to decide what to do with the property that this person once had. They have to decide what final arrangements they need to make to dispose of this person's physical sense. And it can get ugly. It gets ugly very quickly, just amongst family members who, the day before, loved and supported one another. It is something that falls apart very quickly. As a Roman saying once said, something along the lines of unbridled anger quickly finds weapons. And that's what these families do to each other in the family. And it's unfortunate. So that's why I want an honest and open conversation with my hospice team, because if there's anything else I need to do to mitigate the pain and the trouble that the real victim, the survivors, have to go through. I consider them the victims. The survivors are the victims. And so there's anything more I can do for them, I need to know that. And I need to do it if I can. And I've been very on top of that for years. One of the first things I did was write a will and fight for my life insurance and make sure that was all squared away. And nowadays, I don't really do that much, except now there's the big question as to what to do with my funeral. I don't know what the answer to that is. I've not thought about that. So I don't have a direction quite yet on that. I need to think about that. Maybe that will be another podcast. Maybe that's how I'll figure that out. What I want to do with my body. A lot of me is I don't care. Because I'll be dead. But what would my family want? They want something. And I don't know if they know what that is. I think it's more of a question to them than it is to me. Because they should be able to get whatever they want. If I want some quirky little thing, yeah, I'll ask for it. But the biggest target, the greatest endeavor should be to help soothe the actual victims, which are the survivors. So, I have had an open relationship with my hospice team for years because of this, where I get full disclosure because I've asked for it. And recently I got some additional information that to me sort of came out of the blue. I didn't ask for it, I didn't know it, but they understood at least that I would want to know it, which is good. And they told me something that they think as time progresses, that they think how it is almost likely decline and die. And they're very honest and clear in that regard. And I'm going to tell you what it is they told me what I should expect as I have my final moments of this life. So, what should I expect in the very end? Well, I sort of brought this up because I was complaining about my physical well-being, in particular my retention of water. In short, I'm retaining more and more water as my kidneys fail more and more, and I'm starting to look like the Michelin Man. I'm starting to blow up and get all puffy, and I hate it. I've always been a thin guy. Always. My whole life I've been skinny. So for me to suddenly look in the mirror and make it looks like I'm a total fatty sort of sends me off on a pretty depressed rant. And that's exactly what I did to my hospice nurse. I would say, "Oh my God, I am a fatty, McFatty, fat. It's just disgusting." And even though he said, "Joe, it's just water weight," I was like, "I don't care. It looks the same as fat. It could be anything, but it's still the same thing." And I really lamented the idea that with heart failure, I'm just going to slowly put on water weight until I'm drowning in my own fluids and puffed up like, oh, what's her name from Willy Wonka? She turned into a blueberry. The little girl who turned into a blueberry and they had to squeeze all the blueberry juices out of her. I forget which of the kids uh, in the chocolate factory that in Willy Wonka chocolate's factory that did that. I forget the girl's name. Anyway, I kind of imagined that happening to me. Big, puffed up and blue, and I'm gonna have Oompa Loompas jumping on me, squeezing out the blueberry juice. And I'm a vain person. I admit it. I don't want to look fat at the very end. I'm not a fat guy. I don't want the very last few years or months of my life to look like I'm a big old fatty. Because I'm not. Darn it. I never have been. So I'm being totally vain, and I know that. I admit it. To the very end, I'm going to be vain. So he said to me, well, the fact of the matter is, the most likely way you are going to die is going to be from a sudden cardiac event, which is something that I've always known in the back of my head. I'm sure I've mentioned it in this podcast as a possibility. Not only am I gaining a bunch of weight and water weight, I should say, and blowing up from the heart failure and the kidney failure, my heart is straining tremendously. which is the real core problem here. And eventually it's going to stop. It's just getting weaker and weaker, and it's getting more and more difficult for my heart to pump. And it's going to fail entirely at some point. And this hospice team member more or less said to me that they've had discussions about me, and the consensus has been that I will more than likely, it's a probability, not a possibility, a probability, that I will die from a sudden cardiac event. So, in a way that was meant to make me feel better, I won't die like, was it Marsha? Was Marsha the blueberry? Anyway, in a way, it was to make me feel better that I'm not going to turn into a Willy Wonka blueberry. And that's good. That does help me feel better. I don't want to be a blueberry. But in a weird way, I think it was meant to give me some peace with that worrying, because more than likely I will just one day drop to the floor and die. It's sudden, it's instant, and bam, you're down. It's not, ooh, I'm feeling woozy. No, you just go out like a light and down you go. Don't even know what ever happened. There's no pain, there's no suffering. You just die because your heart fails to work and stops, and you die. That sounds terrible to a lot of people, but to me it sounds better than dying like a blueberry. If I had to pick, I'd pick the sudden cardiac over a blueberry death. But that is some new information for me that I had to share with my family, that is the probability of how I will go. I've told most of my family, not all of them, and some of them might learn about it just through this podcast. Same with some of my friends. I've told some of them, not all of them, but the news is that it's most likely I will die from a sudden cardiac event, and I will just essentially drop dead. The downside with that is there's no room for preparation. I worry about my dog. I want to make sure my dog is cared for. And I can't go a week of being dead in my apartment before someone finds me and my poor dog is there by himself. Think about what happened to Gene Hackman's dog that was in the news. That filled me with terror when I read that news story. If you don't know, if you haven't heard, Gene Hackman died, right? And his wife died coincidentally from something else on the same day. It's insane. Their dog was, for the moment, in the kennel when they died. And so the dog was trapped in there for weeks and slowly died of dehydration and starvation. And to think of that happening to my little guy is unbearable. I don't want that to happen to him. Again, he's going to be the victim, not me. I'll be dead and out of the game. He's the victim because now I'm a rotting corpse on the ground and no one's taking care of him. So that's the downside of that sort of death. So we've tried to develop a method where my nurse checks in every afternoon to make sure I'm still ticking and lucid so that my dog doesn't have to wait a week before rescue and suffer for that. And he just barked in the background when I said that. I don't know what his problem is. But anyway, so we've set up a daily check-in to try to account for that. And that's what we're going to do. And there's not much else I can do, unfortunately, that I can think of to prepare for that sort of death. There's no forewarning, like, oh no. There's not going to be a forewarning to my family that maybe you should go see him this week, or sort of thing. Call the family, have them fly out. It will be sudden and unexpected, more than likely. Which means it's very difficult to plan those final things for. I think the moral of that story is if my family wants to take the time to see me before I die, they should do it now or soon, because they're not going to have the luxury of a few days warning, more than likely. They'll just one day get the news that it's too late to see me again for one last time, and that I have suddenly died. And they might even say, I just talked to him over text yesterday. He seemed fine. Yep. Welcome to sudden cardiac events. That's how they operate. 1 minute you're fine, and the next you're anything but. So, managing what the family wants and needs in order to see me before I die is probably the next thing I need to somehow address. And unfortunately, there is no easy answer. It's going to be now or soon, or you're going to increasingly approach a risk of not seeing me before I die. And that's just the cold truth of it. Everything else I've prepared for. I have a will. I've updated it as things happen and time goes on. I've kept it up to date. I have life insurance. Now I've got the daily check-in. I have a plan of who's going to take my dog locally and take care of him if I die. I do have that set up. I've done as much as I can. The problem is now what's left is I think the family needs to do it. And so far, they're reluctant to do that because I still think there's some grain of denial there. And I don't want to do it. I think fundamentally most people just don't want to deal with death. But you sort of have to if you want to get what you want. So if they want to see me before I die, there's really no other way to do it. Because there's not going to be a prolonged warning like there is in some people. Like there would be if I were a blueberry. So let's call it a mixed news. Bad news, I'm probably going to die of a sudden cardiac event, which is going to be something totally unplanned and difficult to plan for whatsoever. Bummer. But the good news is, I'm not going to die from being a blueberry. Whew. Thank goodness. That was weighing on me. But all what's left is now my family and friends have to take the appropriate action that they think is necessary. If not, they're just going to have to live with it. They chose not to see me, and they'll never see me again. And there is no second chance. That's just the way it is. Well, with that being said, folks, I'm not going to belabor the point. I think I've made it. I think I've made it vividly enough and communicated what I understand to be the situation and what sort of options are before me. What's before me is very small and little in terms of options. My family is the one who's going to have to step up. My friends are the ones that are going to have to step up and try to see me if they want to see me before I die. And to be honest, I don't think it's going to happen. I've known my family and my friends for quite some time now. I don't think they're going to take this warning and take any action because of it. I could be wrong, but I don't think that's going to happen. And unfortunately, it will be most likely just the fact that for a lot of people, they will never see me alive again after a certain point when I die without warning. But other than communicating that to them, sort of as I have here, there's really nothing more that I can do. So I'm not going to stress about it. And I think I've done everything I can do with respect to what I can do to prepare. The big exception, like I said, is what to do about my body, where to throw that thing when I'm done with it. I've not given a lot of thought to that. I don't know. And so that's I guess that's one thing that's still on me that I have to consider. Hopefully I have enough time to sort of come to a resolution with at least that. And figure that little item out. Everything else though I've already done. I've done a lot of preparation. And I try to make it as painless as possible as I can for the survivors. But I can only do so much. At some point, they're going to have to be responsible for their own feelings and their own consequences. And we're coming to that point to where they're going to be solely responsible for what remains. So how they feel and how they deal with my sudden demise when that occurs. Which is actually another sad point. I know I've said this before, but I realize that every time I publish a podcast, it could very well be my last words to the world. I don't know. I, especially with a cardiac event, I could die suddenly or I should say between, after a podcast, and then you just never hear from me again. I've thought about doing like a dead hand episode that gets launched if I'm not around to stop it. But I'd be terrified that I'd somehow screw that up and would go out and say I'm dead when I'm not. Because I'm also an idiot with some stuff like that. I'm a space cadet. I just don't want to forget. Have that go out. Oops. No, I'm not dead. Sorry. Oopsie doozy. That would be so bad. That's my only reluctance for doing a dead hand uh, episode that would go out after I've expired. So I need to think on that some more because I think just not knowing for my listeners is kind of crappy. Uh, I'll probably eventually do the dead hand thing once I feel like it might be getting closer. But again, if it's sudden, I won't feel it. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That's another thing I'm gonna have to figure out. So that's two things on my plate. One, what to do with my rotting body. Two, how to handle the final podcast. Those are the only two things I think left on my plate. Well, actually, those are two and three. Number one is to make sure my family and friends are aware of the circumstance that I face and the probability, and that if they want to see me before I die, it's on them. And they may very well come out and see me thinking that, and then I live for months or a year after that. But isn't it better to have taken the chance and see me at least, knowing you did see me at some point before I expired, than for it to be completely too late and you have no opportunity whatsoever to see me ever again? To me, that's an easy choice. So I hope they have the similar choice because I would like to see them, be with them before I expire myself. But it's just something that's extraordinarily difficult to plan for. Anyway, with all that being said, my friends, I think I'm going to wrap up this podcast. My voice is starting to go out on me. That's that's my clear sign that I need to wrap it up. So we'll see what happens. I have some things to do, but I really hope my family and friends step up to the challenge. I really do. But to be blunt, and I don't care if they hear this, I don't think they will. I'm just being honest. I'd be surprised if they did. Hopefully, I'm wrong. And if they're offended by that, come on. Do you blame me? I'm one of those people who would rather be pleasantly surprised than horrified and let down. So I'm one of those types of people that likes to assume the worst case scenario. So give me a break. Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast. Again, I'm sorry, the episodes are kind of more sporadic. It's, as I've said before, really dependent on my energy levels and what I'm going through physically. And that's just the way it is. So thank you for listening to this and giving me a venue through which to share my thoughts and solidify my thinking. Because I did come out of this with some tasks for me and a task for my friends and family that I was not necessarily thinking in those terms before I started this podcast. So, see, self reflection really helps. And thank you for giving me a venue through which to do it. If you wish to support the podcast, you can just click support it through the Spotify homepage, or more easily, just go to patreon.com/mydogwilleatmyface. But again, you've already given me the best thing you could have done, which is your listenership. I appreciate that. And of course, feel free to share this with other folks if you think they're interested. I'm not in any way trying to keep this podcast private or something stupid. It's on the internet. Anyone can hear it. So if you know someone else who might benefit from it, and think about past episodes too. This podcast has now been around for a couple of years. And I think some of the best episodes happened way back then, frankly. So it doesn't hurt for a newcomer to go back and listen to some of the older episodes. So feel free to share. Feel free to listen to old ones if you're curious, if you're a newcomer. Thank you for your support. And for now, I just have to say, auf Wiedersehen.